the Valley Current.
As I learned that with the back and the spinal cord, that it's like anything else. Like when the nerves are damaged, they inflame the muscles surrounding them. Okay.
Right.
When the muscles are inflamed, that's where the pain comes from. That's why it feels good to put ice on it, because it numbs it. It's not that you're not firing pain. It's just that the muscles are too numb to absorb the pain and then make it real in your mind, so to speak. So
right.
If you strengthen your core muscles and lose enough weight, you can literally wrap almost like a steel around your damaged nerves and spinal cord and bone spurs and herniations. And the pain level just is dropped like 95%. Now, I mean, I still have issues with the nerve damage in my neck, but like that was the basis of the journey, is that I had to relearn how to walk. I was not going to be on pills. None of the traditional therapies worked. And so once I found exactly what it was, it was like a pinhole in a paper. I could just see the light on the other side. And I was like, oh, I just have to show up every day and go hard and I'll be fine. And so, the yoga journey starts, but the main journey is the weight loss, because I've always thought it's never what you do on your yoga mat that defines how well you do. It's everything you do off the mat. And everything off the mat means telling yourself no a lot to a lot of things and reconditioning your mind and life hacking. And so I just went about knowing what all of my vices were, all my pitfalls were, all my blind spots were, when I was weak, when I was productive. I figured all of it out, and I just took a little bit off at a time. And literally that's how I wound up losing 103 pounds and getting everything back together.
You went from the top of 283 down 103 pounds to like 180 or below 180?
Yeah, my lowest was 176. Yeah.
Wow. Because you're like 6 foot 3.5 or 4 inches. You're taller than me, I think.
No, I thought you were taller than me, actually. I think I'm around 6'2". So yeah, right. But I mean, or 6'1". But yeah, I wish I was taller. But no.
No, you look pretty tall because the tattoos are kind of a set off. But as I said earlier, you moved well when you were bigger. And I came into the yoga scene at Y6 when I thought they started 4 years ago, but you're telling me they actually started longer than that. Is that right? They started a lot earlier than that? I thought they started in that location like 4 years ago, back in 2020 or so, maybe first quarter of 2020. Did they start even before then?
No, here's what I started at Energia Yoga, and it's right up the road north on Bruce B. Downs, more towards Target. It's right by the Amscot on the right-hand side of the road across from the car wash, and I think it's the Christian Auto Brothers or the AutoZone place, right?
Right.
So I started there, and Ricky started working there.
Are they still there?
No, they closed. So they closed at the beginning of COVID, and like I think the Y6 Arch 2, I think it had just started when the lockdown started, because when things slowed up more. The first thing I was looking at is, when can I get back into yoga? Let me get into hot yoga. And so Y6 pretty much got its start here right at the tail end of that, when things were opening back up. So, and then I went and grabbed Ricky, and I was like, you have to come to this place. I want you to teach. And she's like, I don't know if I want to do it, and blah, 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 blah. And like, look where she's at now.
She's the manager now.
Yeah, she runs it.
She's been promoted to the manager now. Right.
Yeah.
She runs it. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Did you do other things besides just the intense yoga, which is not so intense? I mean, it's not like you're doing 4 hours of yoga a day, but you're doing an hour of yoga. You do it pretty much every day or almost every day. And then you must have made other changes, right? Like nutrition must have changed somewhere in that, right?
Yeah, well, let me square this up here. I started working full time again in January of this year, but I took the previous before that 2.5 years off. So like I had just started Yoga 6. It was like 6 months into it that I more or less just quit everything. I just wanted to restart. I had to figure some things out. Mainly I had to figure out my spine. It's like my sons are graduating high school. Like I have to figure this thing out. I'm on the path, but I got to go ahead and close the loop. So that's where that's where we met. And that's where you saw like you were right at the beginning of that journey when I wasn't working. I was just working out all day, around 3 or 4 hours a day. So it's yoga. The main thing also was walking. Like we got a dog. I had never had a dog as an adult. And so I walk him a lot. And so I average around 4.5 or 5 miles a day. And back then it was it was less because I was still on a cane, and even then, like I still had a handicap placard that's good until next June. I didn't come off my cane fully until September of 2023. But the reason why I never hauled it into Y6 is because I can get from like a parking lot into a yoga studio and get down, right? But if there's any kind of, at the time, there's any kind of long-term, really any more than 300 or 400 feet, I had a cane, and anything more than a half mile is going to have double arm crutches. And so it was a distance and stamina thing. Yeah. So the changes were I did that and then yoga, and then there's things like, so what happens when you go on any kind of journey like this? Like you have to life hack yourself, right? So if you're at 280 and you're like, okay, I'm going to lose weight, what am I going to do first? Well, I knew just from common sense, and I'd always worked out. I'd always, like, even at 263 pounds, I was competing in indoor rowing. Like I had 18-inch biceps and a 53-inch chest. I can show you a picture. I had a 14-inch forearm. I was a psycho. So I've always been in really good shape, but I could only row because of my spine. I couldn't do anything with impact. So I just got on that machine and went crazy for a number of years. So I've always been in really good shape, but it's like, how am I going to get down? Well, I knew, okay, let me just switch to water, not Coke, not Diet Coke, just water.
Right.
And then I was like, okay, and what else can I do next? And then I just started eating between 12 and 6. I can eat whatever I want between 12 and 6. And so then, you do a few things.
So you have an 18-hour fasting window.
Yeah, at that time.
That means you're only okay.
Yeah, right. And so just switching to water and the intermittent fasting, like the first 20, 25 pounds just fell off in the shower, right? So you go, okay, so you hit that plateau. What do I do next? I'm like, God damn, man, nothing's working. What do I do now? I'm like, all right, well, what's not working? Is it my cardio? Do I need to lose weight? Is it my strength? What is it? And it turns out it's like, okay, well, I'm checking my sleep on my Apple Watch, and I'm only sleeping 4.5 or 5 hours a night, right? So I said, okay.
Yeah, it's bad.
I was like, yeah, it's horrible. But it was because of my spine. I flip-flop around like a fish. I can't help it. And I was like, okay, well, I got to find out a way to get to 7 hours of sleep. So the next goal is this: no matter what I got to do, I got to get 7 hours of sleep a night. What do I do? First thing, my bed was too soft. I got rid of my bed. I slept on my floor for 4 years. I had no bed in my room. I was like, okay, I got on my floor. I got an extra 45 minutes or an hour sleep a night. Okay, so now I'm at like 4.5, 5 hours. How do I get to hour 6? Well, don't look at a screen for an hour before I go to bed. Stop drinking water at 6 o'clock so I don't have to pee. Okay, I got 45 more minutes a night. And I literally just did an equation like that, and watched it for 2.5 years, and just whittled it down one thing at a time. So then I got, you get down to 240. What do I do next? Okay, well, we all have vices. All right, well, I got to cut this. I got to cut that out. Some of the hardest things to cut out. You cut that one beer out. My God, that's like you drop 10 pounds. Okay, well, what's next? That's all I did. I just went one thing at a time and figured out what it was and made that a goal in and of itself, and then just did little things every day in furtherance of it and just didn't step back. So that's why it took so many years, and that's why I don't have any skin. Like I had a double hernia surgery in September, and my doctor, it's interesting because he looks at me and he's like, wow, you call me a specimen. But he was an army doctor downrange. So he knew I was a veteran. So we kind of a little more open with each other. He's like, God, you're a specimen. He's like, where's all the skin from the 100 pounds you lost? And I was like, well, no, I lost it over so many years. I didn't have the skin, because I knew it was only going to be sustainable if I did it slowly and gradually. And so that's why I don't have the skin afterwards. So
I'm guessing based on everything you just said, it's a total guess that you must read Tim Ferriss's books, right? Tim Ferriss is an author. He's become famous at kind of experimenting with his body and sleep patterns.
Yeah, I know.
Tim Ferriss is like a big podcaster too. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. He actually, the thing that I applaud him for is he motivated people that wouldn't otherwise do any sort of podcast to do a podcast. And one of them that he did, and I'm going to get this book for you and give it to you as a gift, is Peter Attia's book that's called Outlive. And it's very much about you have to take care of yourself. The Western medicine and even Eastern medicine folks are not going to really have any dramatic solutions for you. You have to observe, you have to pay attention, you have to do things that adjust your way you sleep, adjust the way you eat, adjust the way you exercise. And it's just constant experimentation, and that experimentation can never end because your body is constantly changing as it ages, and you just have to keep observing. And so when things happen, like an injury, you gotta care for it, and then you gotta pay attention to where the pain is. And I agree with you. This idea of getting really strong and losing weight in the process is probably two key components to extending your health span, regardless of what DNA gene composition deals you in terms of your lifespan. You want your lifespan to be maybe over 100 years, let's call it 100. You want your health span to be similar, if not identical, and you want both to be basically in parallel. You don't want to have a miserable last 10 years of your life, as most people do, and probably most veterans do, or the last 20 years, where all you're doing is popping pills, right? All you're doing is taking medication. And of course, Big Pharma loves it. And of course, doctors have gotten into the mode of, if there's a script I can write, I'm going to write it. And people just need to take it. And that's why they're bound to me as a patient, because I'm the one that has to renew that script. So it's really an interesting situation, because I do think this yoga stuff is starting to catch on. I'm not sure whether Y6 will be the ultimate successful franchise, the McDonald's-like franchise that I suppose somebody will become, because, you know, yoga studios have traditionally been very small operations, basically mom and pop, done out of passion, right? I mean, basically the people that like doing yoga and are good at teaching it. I'm sure you could teach it. Perhaps you already have. I'm sure you'd be good at it, given your PhD and other stuff that you've written and the journey that you've been on. But here's the kicker to the story, Ben. Most people in that class, they don't really know anything. Like, I didn't know that you told me you were a lawyer, because I mentioned I was a lawyer. And of course, lawyers like talking to other lawyers for a variety of reasons. We have the same vocabulary. But I had no idea that you had a PhD in criminal justice, or that your dissertation was online, or that you've done this online stuff. I didn't know that. So I think the yoga studio of the future will have some community way to link people together in a semi-private way, because some people don't want to tell their story, but in a private way that says, hey, this is who I am. And if you happen to have some issue in this area, that area, I might be able to give you a little bit of pro bono advice about, here's how you deal with child support conflicts, or here's how you deal with out-of-state moves. I'm not going to be your lawyer, but here's my 5 minutes of the book you might want to read, or the article you might want to read, or that sort of thing. None of that is disclosed in that class. Of course, people are very private, but we're all in the same metabolic field together for an hour or so on almost a regular basis, almost like it's church. I mean, almost like it's a ritual, right?
You know, it's so many layers to what you said there, but that's what I think it really is, like, in a sense, because we're going there, and just like it said in yoga and during the class, and the whole theme is that you're basically giving thanks to your body for moving and working today. So whichever form that you want to organize and give thanks to something that's invisible and not in the room is going to be some form of religion, right? So, or it's going to have some kind of thought that's going to, it's some paradigm or structure is going to be close to religious. But it is interesting because you sit next to these people for all this time and you don't know anyone's story. We just kind of go in there and sweat, and, you know, like, it's interesting how we know each other's, like, we know each other's smells and body types, and how we know those things that are way more intimate than you would ever, but we don't know the other stuff that's just surface about each other, you know?
Right. So. It's really interesting. And I think that may change in the future. I don't know if it will in that particular studio, but I think in general, it's a really highly educated group of people. There are a few other PhDs. Of course, my wife, Dr. Jrusso, she's got a PhD from Stanford. And, you know, there's a lot of really smart people, but you don't necessarily find out much about their depth unless you spend a few minutes talking to them. And even then, I've always believed that the yoga studio should have like a little coffee bar associated with it, but probably there's some rule inside a strip mall operation that says no, because that conflicts with Starbucks coffee exclusivity. But
Yeah.
I don't think Starbucks is exclusive. There are other places that sell coffee in that strip mall, right? So
Yeah.
to me, there would be some way for people to spend 5 or 10 minutes. And of course, I now been doing, just to tell you, I've been doing back-to-back classes. I've been going at 8 a.m. and doing 9:30, and then between 9:05 and 9:29, that 20 minutes or so, that 24 minutes, I just sit outside on the bench in the front and talk to people as they leave, just to find out more of who they are. And I think if they had a table and maybe a round table. Yeah, and this podcast results because I said to you, hey, you should come on my podcast, just tell your story. And in fact, at some point, maybe you'll get permission to tell more about what you're doing, because I'd love to come down and see you in action and see how things work in the criminal justice system in Tampa. Just to understand, because when I started practice, yeah, I'm sure it must be wild, because when I started practice, when I went to law school, I clerked for a judge, and then I also clerked for a guy that did felony murder appeals. Basically, he was an appellate defender, and I worked for him in the summer. And he said to me, Jack, you're a smart guy. You don't want to go into criminal law. The clients will put the knife in your back and twist it. And those words remain with me some 45 years later. I mean, literally, I've been in practice for over 45 years. And I remember back in those days, it was just, and this guy had some success. I mean, he did okay. And he was a great writer and a great thinker. And I learned a lot from him. But boy, did he convince me to shift to civil, because I thought I was going to be Perry Mason doing criminal defense cases. And of course, I've done a few things that are on the borderline of white collar defense, but I haven't done what I think you do, and I'm fascinated by it. And at some point, I'd love to come down and just observe and then talk to you about what played out, because I'm sure I'd learn a lot and I'd really enjoy it.
God, I could just sit here and just ramble on about what you just said, but I can't. But I have to say this last thing, though. I have to say something about the criminal defense thing. Yeah. The truth for criminal defense, period, for a private attorney, okay, that there's two rules. And the second rule applies to every criminal defense attorney. The first one's for private attorneys. For private attorneys, criminal defense, you are only going to get the money you are given the first and only time they will ever give you money. So its contracts can be the same way, because there's like an arc where people get pissed off and they're just going to go at you, right? They're not going to, they're going to be later on bills or whatever. Right. But so you're only going to get that money. So you better get it up front. And then number two is that, your clients, they're going to work every possible angle they can to avoid whatever their punishment was. So if that means filing a 3850 ineffective assistance of counsel claim, if that means anything possible, it's like I never viewed it and was never taught to view it as being thrown under the bus. I understand that, but it's more of survival. So the survival of them not giving you any more than they have to, and then getting on the other side, that's what controls. So
right. I had a business course professor at UCLA Law School, and he used to say, his name was Stanley Siegel, very funny guy. He should have done stand-up comedy. He did stand-up comedy during these classes. He taught corporations course. He taught partnership. He said there's two rules. Rule number one, you pay. You say to the client, you pay. Rule number two, you pay now. You pay now. He used to generate so much laughter in the jokes. He said, I'm serious. This is the keys to success. You have to get paid. You have to ask for it. You have to get paid now. No installment plans. No rubber checks. I mean, he was so funny. And of course, I wish these people were still alive. I'd love to talk to them. But, you don't realize the stories that you're going to have based on years and years ago. I mean, that was probably going on nearly 50 years ago, as I think about it. But, he was such an interesting guy and had done so much successful work. So, Ben, thanks for coming on. This is so much fun, and we'll do it again. And I've got a gift for you. I'm going to bring in. It's a weighty book, but it's definitely worth the read. Hey,
Yeah,
well, I
thanks.
look forward to talking to you again. Take care.
Yeah,
Take care.
yeah, thanks a lot.
Congratulations on all the weight loss. I'm following you. I've lost about 75 pounds. I need to lose about another 30. So you're my role model, man.
Okay,
Stay with it. You're my role model.
Hit that 100 club, so, okay.
All right, I will. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.